Hello, everyone. For the sake of anyone who is not my English teacher, I'm just going to quick say this is my book report project for semester 2. I'm gonna just keep it public on the internet for a while. Uh, yeah, then there's no real reason. If you're just here for the ride, it's gonna be a ride. Definitely. The book I did for this semester book report was 10th Grade Bleeds by Heather Brewer. So our Mr. Main character, Vladimir Todd, or Vlad, he is the he is a half human, half vampire abomination. Some prophecy which was deemed a fairy tale, but it's not. What happens is human vampire crossbred child is technically invincible and is someday going to rule over vampires and humans with an iron fist. Vlad has a girlfriend named Meredith. I don't mention her much, but she's mentioned, so here's her being mentioned. And then Vlad has his best friend Henry. They've been friends since childhood, just forever, basically. And at one point, Vlad bit Henry. Not by any means of really anything, because Henry was like, "Ooh, Vlad's a vampire, so cool, bite me." And then and then eventually that happened. And there's two things that can happen with a vampire bite, and that's either human becomes vampire's drudge, which is basically mind slave, or they become a vampire. Otis is Vlad's uncle, but not because he's technically biologically related to his father. Otis and Thomas, who is Vlad's father, got bit by the same vampire, therefore making them brothers by the means of vampire law and logic. Otis has been around for many, many centuries. There's no count on how many, but there is information that Thomas mentored Diablo, who is the main antagonist, back when Thomas was alive. And if Diablo can say that he's centuries old, then that means that Thomas has to be even older than that. Vicus was Otis and Thomas's mentor. Vicus is now also Vlad's mentor after the events of the last book in the series, where Otis brings Vlad to Siberia to get training over winter break. Diablo, other than the fact that he's the main antagonist, like I said, he's old. He wants Vlad's powers, basically. He wants to be the Provis, and allegedly there's a ritual that can transfer the powers from Vlad to Diablo. Then Diablo's plan after doing that is to just straight up kill Vlad. Snow is another character. Vlad meets Snow when he goes to the crypt with the Goths, and there's nothing much to say about her. She's described as really pretty, but black hair and pale skin, so stereotypical goth. Edgar Poe. I don't know his middle name, but if his middle name is Allen, I wouldn't put it past his parents. Mr. Edgar Allan Poe. That may not be his name. His name is Edgar Poe, though. I can affirm that is a kid in Vlad's high school. Not friends with in the slightest. Vlad and Eddie are both losers. They don't have many friends and are bullied quite commonly. But Eddie has a goal to expose that Vlad is a vampire. He just wants to be cool, so he's gonna be like, Vlad's a vampire, and expose it. Eddie walks around with a camera, and he got a better camera at some point in this book. And now there's even more reason to be scared of him, because the camera has a better resolution, and therefore it's gonna be easier to capture whatever Vlad's doing. Now the aforementioned goth kids. There's 5 of them, I think, but the only ones that may or may not have any importance are October, Kristoff, and Sprat. Vlad has known these kids forever. Bathory is a pretty small town, so basically all the kids know each other. He's known them for a while. He's wanted to become friends with them, but he's been scared of it. I mean, he's only had Henry for his whole... Ignatus? Throughout the whole book, he's chasing Vlad around. Diablo was like, hey, Vlad's here. Bring him to me. We'll kill him later. You can have the joy of killing him. I promise. Nellie is Vlad's aunt. Kinda not really. Nellie is not Vlad's aunt by any sort of biology, but after his parents died, Nellie took him in, and Nellie was a very, very good friend of his mother's. In the beginning of the story, Vlad runs into Bella and Tom, who are the two kids who have been bullying him for years, forever, and they are currently beating up one of the goth kids named Sprat. Vlad steps in and they go, and then Vlad just goes on with his day. Later on, the goths come to say thank you for saving Sprat, and October invites Vlad to go with them to a Halloween party that's happening at a building called the Crypt. It's the big Halloween party. It's not a school event. It's a separate event from the Crypt thing too. And Vlad usually goes with Henry every year. They dress up, they go. So Henry comes over not long before the party, and Vlad asks why he's not in a costume, and Henry's like, I'm not going. And then they have a big fight about the fact that Henry is Vlad's drudge and how Henry doesn't want to be the drudge anymore. And then Vlad gets sad, but after Henry asks to be released from drudgedom, that's what I'm deeming it, drudgedom, Vlad's like, technically I guess I did promise to let you go if you asked, so I'll look into it. It's gonna take a bit, but I'll look into the ritual. I know there is. And then later on, there is the Halloween party in the crypt. Then once Vlad has sufficiently gotten to the crypt building, and just, he's having a good time. He's met a few kids. This weird Kristoff person said that he was a vampire. And sitting on the couch in the crypt with Kristoff is Snow. Vlad looks at her. There's a conversation. Later on, Vlad goes outside to just, catch his breath, get some air. Snow's abusive father comes into the building, screaming a whole racket, beating the crap out of her, and then after that gets taken outside. Vlad goes in and steps in, gets her father to leave, and then Snow goes to hug him as thanks. And then Vlad bites her. And once Vlad's drank almost all of her blood, he finally lets her go. She collapses onto the ground. Vlad gets absolutely horrified and runs off. He runs away, not knowing what to do. He runs away, he finds a phone booth, and he calls Henry. 'Cause what else do you do? And he's on the phone crying to Henry at 2 a.m. And Henry's like, just wait a second, I'll be there in a second. So Henry gets over there in his older brother's car, and then they get back to Henry's house, and Vlad's explaining himself, and everyone's all crazy stressed, and then Vlad's like, I really need to go and get home, and Henry's like, no you don't, we'll just tell your aunt that you slept over here, and Vlad's like, no, she'll kill me, and Henry's like, we've done that before. Pretty sure he ends up staying the night. The next evening, Vlad and Henry drive up to Strokerton, where the main Elysian base is for this area of the world, where Diablo is, to give him the notebook that he said he gifted to Thomas because him and Thomas were good friends. And Diablo even proved that it was him who gave Thomas the journal by saying that there was a D imprinted on the corner of one of the covers, signifying all that information. So Henry and Vlad are walking up to the building, and comes up from behind Vlad and Henry, and has a knife to Henry's throat. And then there's a big battle. They fight. Vlad's going so quick, Henry thinks it's amazing. Oh my goodness. And then Diablo comes out, stops that madness, brings them inside, and it's like, the journal. give me the journal. And then Vlad gives him the journal, and then there's a whole conversation about Otis and where he's been because Otis went missing. And Vlad asks if the nightmares from earlier will now go away. Diablo, confused, asks what nightmares. And Vlad said the nightmares that I assume were from you, about getting stabbed and killing me, and you know. Diablo laughs. It's like, oh, so that worked. Good. And Vlad's like, what are you talking about? And Diablo's like, oh, we kidnapped your uncle. And used a special crystal on him so that he can't really talk to you, but he can send you what he's going through. And then after Vlad is told that Otis is there, demand Otis, I demand my uncle. So Diablo gets his vampire lackey helper, Jask, to get Otis from whatever jail cell, whatever hole they buried him in. And Otis is disheveled, starved, and just generally disgusting. After Otis was brought in, there was some wonderful banter, and then it came out that Ignitus is Vlad's grandfather. It's beaten to crap in front of Vlad. After some banter, Diablo says, well, let's get down to business. I would like your powers. And then he sends Henry and Otis back down to the jail cell. And Otis is like, very specifically, put them in the same cell. I hope he eats him, because Ignitus is showing Otis and Henry down to the jail cell. Jask and Diablo go after getting Vlad's very essence. Then after that happens, after Vlad breaks free of that, he goes and he's trying to run away to go save his uncle and Henry because he knows his uncle hasn't eaten for months and he doesn't want his friend getting eaten. So he's trying to fight both Jask and Diablo at the same time, which is impossible. So then he ends up going and mind-controlling Jask into fighting Diablo. Diablo gets all hissy, literally saying, he's mind-controlling you, you fool! And they're fighting, and then while they're doing that, Vlad runs out to find the jail cell where his uncle and Henry are. I don't know. Finds the jail cell, and Otis is drinking Henry's blood. Vlad gets all weird. It's just like, no, Otis, stop. And then Otis stops, obviously, and then explains, he let me. He said it was okay, and I couldn't help myself. So then that was all resolved. Henry is like, no, it's cool, I'm fine, totally fine. They're sneaking around trying to get out, and then they go through the lobby to the front door, because there's really not that many ways to get out of here. Because now they're battling the Earth's rotation. The sun is about to rise. And so they're trying to make it out. Diablo meets them at the door, and then Otis and Diablo are fighting. And Henry runs off while Otis and Diablo are going at it. Vlad's frozen in the doorway. After a few minutes, Ignitus comes in and starts fighting Otis, so Diablo is now going after Vlad. And then at that point, Henry runs in with the Lucas, which is just flashes a very bright beam of light in a direction. So Diablo comes running up. Vlad now has the Lucas. He checks. Oh, it's the real one this time. It's not the fake one. Then Otis is walking out from the hall that he was fighting Ignitus in. Ducks down just in time for Vlad to shoot the thing and shoot off one of Diablo's hands. Just out of... No one's celebrating victory yet, because after about 20 seconds, Diablo goes and pushes Vlad out of a window, jumps to... The sun has risen, Diablo lights on fire. Vlad is somehow completely fine, by some means of logic. Diablo's literally sitting there on fire, holding Vlad to the pavement, and Vlad, at this point, just, go into the shade, you're about to die, and Diablo's like, no, we're gonna die together, and then Diablo pulls out the blade and almost kills Vlad, but instead gets pushed off and runs into the shadows. And then Vlad goes back into the lobby. Henry and Otis are there, just vibing about. Now they're celebrating. We get to celebrate now. They're celebrating now. And now they have to basically go through the whole building to find some sunscreen so that Otis can live. They find some SPF 40. It's not great, but it's okay. They get home. Vicus gets word of the chaos that has ensued. After a while, Vicus sends a letter to Otis. It's somewhere along the lines of, I have been to many meetings as the head of the Siberia Russian Council, and I have not gotten much open-mindedness, but I have been allowed for you to be in my care until your trial, which is in 10 months' time. And with that power, I have deemed that for now you're going to stay in Bathory. I will be arriving there at the beginning of the school year. I figured if I can't save you and you're gonna die, that you should be with Vlad for as long as possible. Vlad will have a trial too, but we don't know when that's happening yet. So, everyone gets emotional because Otis gets to stay. Then cut to a short while later, it's Freedom Fest time. And of course, Vlad's going with Meredith. They're having a fun time, kissing around, eating candy. Vlad wins Meredith a big pink poodle from some game. And then Meredith goes to hug him as thanks. He gets the urge to bite her again, and then he pushes her away and is like, hey, I never loved you. I have to break up with you. And he starts bawling tears, and Meredith is like, I know you're lying. I know you are. So what's the reason? What's the reason? And then Vlad's like, just get away from me. And then he runs, and just bolts out of there. He runs into Eddie. And Eddie from the shadows is like, out for a nice evening walk? Or out for a snack? Vlad goes, grabs Eddie by the shirt collar, shoves him into a tree, and is like, hey, if you don't get out of my way, I am going to murder you, and I hope you understand that. So F off. Then a few days later, Henry comes up to the house to see Vlad. Vlad's like, oh yeah, about the no longer being my drudge thing. I can do that. I just want to go over that with you first. Let's go up to my room. So they go up to his room. Vlad's like, I just wanted to talk to you about it first. And Henry's like, no, we don't gotta do it. And Vlad's like, wait, joking, right? And Henry's like, no, this is the coolest thing ever. For a while I thought I wanted to not be your drudge anymore, but I think I figured out that I like it. And Vlad's like, oh, wait, really? Okay. So they're all friends again. Then yet again, time skip, a few days after that, he goes back down to the crypt in hopes of finding Snow, which he does. And he apologizes for biting her. And she's like, no, it's amazing, it was the best thing in my life, blah, 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 blah. And then she's like, do you want to do it again? And Vlad's like, no, I plan on never doing that again. And she's like, but you're hungry, aren't you? And Vlad's like, no, I'm not. Go away, I'm leaving. And then she is insistent, and he ends up feeding on her again. And after that, there is yet another time skip to the beginning of the next school year, where Vlad goes and opens his dresser and finds a crumpled up letter. It's an old letter. He's read it before. He's read this letter many, many times. So he reads over the note again, and then that's where the book ends. I like this series a lot so far, but it's getting pretty repetitive. They find these books very funny. Book specifically, 6.5 on 10. 6.5. But so far the series as a whole, maybe like a 8.5. 8.5 on 10. So far. I haven't read the last 2 books yet. We'll see if my